As Mr. Hodges has told you, I am chairman of the Volusia County School Board, but I also wear another hat that gives me a perspective that's also relevant, and that's president of the Florida School Boards Association. So currently I serve in that post as well. I want this to be informal. I'm not going to sit here and lecture to you all because it's 4 o'clock and we'd all be asleep. So I really want this to be give and take. There are a couple of things though that I want to start off with. How many of you went to school in Volusia County? Okay, and where? Go Bulldogs, okay. So how many of the rest of you come from Florida? So, and just give me a hint of what other states you may be from.
Ohio.
Ohio?
Canada.
Canada, okay. Anyone else who's not from?
Georgia.
Georgia? Okay.
New Jersey.
New Jersey, okay. One of the highest funded states for education, New Jersey and Connecticut. Florida and Georgia are in the bottom. But we're still struggling. We're all struggling financially in education. And what I'm here to talk about today is about school reform. And it started before most of y'all entered kindergarten. And I'm assuming, how many freshmen, what grade, freshmen?
Mostly freshmen, but there's some seniors as well.
Okay.
Junior.
So it really, it started back with the nation at risk. I'm sure you've discussed that in length. And so that started the conversation about public education failing students. And then from then it's progressed, and then we had a very, there are some change agents that get elected at different points in time. And when Jeb Bush was elected the governor of the state of Florida in 1998, he was a major change agent for, I believe it's 98, for this, and ushered in school reform. So the accountability that every one of you went to high school with, the FCAT, all of you all have had FCAT, or there was some Georgia CAT or Ohio CAT, just some variations on a theme. But I only made 10 of these because I didn't want to destroy too many trees. So if you will share these, it talks about mission creep. Can anyone tell me what mission creep refers to just usually? Any political science majors in here? Okay. Mission creep means you start out doing something and it expands. What happens expands. I'm just gonna, I only have enough, I think, for you all to share rows here. But, so what's happened with education is there's been a great deal of mission creep. And if you look at this, this is written by a gentleman by the name of Jamie Vollmer, and one of the books that I brought in that I really believe is quite good is called Schools Cannot Do It Alone, and it talks about this era of reform. But if you take a look at this, and you look at, if I may, what has happened in education starting at the turn of the last century, gosh, the last century. It was about nutrition, immunization, health. You come, and this only goes to the 1990s, and it's page upon page about what schools were asked to do, the changes that were done. HIV/AIDS education, death education, computer internet education, inclusion, tech prep, academies, school, gang education, bus safety education, bicycle education, gun safety education, on and on and on, and you could go through this. What we're seeing now, however, is another sea change. It's another one of those moments, and I really think it's been brought about by the lack of money, the lack of influence of unions, teachers' unions specifically, and the perceived failing of public schools. Now, any of you familiar with Senate Bill 6 from last year? Okay, so tell me a little bit about it. Come on, guys. This is not...
Sure.
It was actually one of my questions. It was where teachers' pay is based on students' performance on standardized tests.
Student achievement, that was part of it. Anything else about that? Yes?
Tenure would go away.
Tenure would go away or look very different than what it was. Anything else? Okay. Now, as a school board member, I guess I should just tell you a little bit about that. As a school board member, there are 5 of us in Volusia County. We have an $850 million budget, 80 schools, 61,000 students. The way Florida governs schools is very different than the way they do it in Georgia and Ohio and other places, New Jersey. We only have 67 school districts. So our school districts tend to be very large, and we operate on economies of scale. And so one of the things with Senate Bill 6 said, okay, school districts of Florida, in addition to the merit pay, performance pay, teacher tenure, what got lost in the conversation was every school district had to withhold 5% of their money in order to fund the development of end-of-course exams for every course at the secondary and elementary school level. Any idea how many exams that might be in Volusia County? Come on, there's no wrong answer. Just think about it. Between 300 and 400. Between 300 and 400 end-of-course exams. So on a statewide level, this was basically a $900 million unfunded mandate. So does anyone know what an unfunded mandate is? I don't want to get too political science on yes.
I think it means that the government requires it, but they're not going to pay for that.
That's perfectly exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. The unfunded mandates are rife throughout the education system. So you can see that not only were the teachers upset by this, but school board members and finally jumping on board were the superintendents of schools. They tend to be a little bit more conservative, and now, mind you, the school board races in Florida are nonpartisan, so it's real important to understand that. But even with that nonpartisan stature, the superintendents tend to be a little bit more, I should say, deliberate than the school board members, and that's why most of the school superintendents in the state of Florida are elected. Your bigger school districts do have appointed superintendents, and so it makes a huge difference in the approach to education. Any idea? Well, I'll get to that in a minute. So the superintendents did come along against Senate Bill 6. It passed overwhelmingly in the House and the Senate. No amendments allowed. It was just really my way or the highway. And Governor Christ vetoed it. And then the rest is history. He became an independent, and you know what happened from there. So in addition to that, however, the federal government has sent a lot of money to the states. Do any of you know about that program? Yes?
Is it No Child Left Behind?
Well, that we'll get to in a minute, because that's part of the discussion as well. Yes?
Head Start?
No? Well, my question wasn't framed very well. Race to the top, exactly. But in addition to the Race to the Top money, they sent American Recovery Reinvestment Act money to the state of Florida, of which Volusia County has received over $35 million. So it goes to a couple of different things. Are you familiar with IDEA? Okay, tell me what that means. Disabled
Education
Act. Individual Disability Education Act. Right. So IDEA was a real important part of what happened as a change in the 70s, I believe, Tom, was it? Mr. Hodges, was it in the 70s, IDEA, I think? And then Title I. Does anyone know what Title I represents? Yes?
Is that for sports?
That's Title IX.
Oh,
That's a good thing. Title I?
Title I's a low socioeconomic.
Right.
Socioeconomic.
Right. Low socioeconomic funding. So the federal governments are most involved in two areas, IDEA and Title I funding. And so with that, with the regular stimulus money, with the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act, Volusia County received $35 million, which is going to, that was only a 2-year program, which is going to go away at the end of the 2011 budget year. So it's very significant drop in funding. But the Race to the Top is what I want to talk about, because that is a separate program. And for the first time, the federal government put a lot of money in play, over $4 billion in play in competitive grants, which is something they've never done before. And they said, okay, states, send in some proposals how you can impact low-performing schools, performance pay, how you can close the achievement gap, and there was one other thing which I'll think of later. So that Race to the Top was a major deal. And only 2 states won the first round of Race to the Top. Any ideas? Well, Tennessee and Delaware. Now the second round, 10 states won the money, and Florida was one of them. And we won a nice chunk of change, $700 million. Any idea how many school districts that are in the state of Florida?
You said 67.
67, right. Only 60 school districts applied for the money. And we have to go through a process to develop these programs called memorandums of understanding. And you have to get 3 entities to sign on board an agreement. The superintendent of schools, your chairman of the school board, and the president of your teachers union. And so it's a really important piece. And what the Governor Chris did, he put together a task force. The first task force for Race to the Top funding for the state of Florida failed. And one of the reasons they failed, according to reading the materials, is it wasn't collaborative at all. It was, did anyone know about the Florida Foundation for Florida's Future? Have you ever heard about that? Look it up. It works behind the scenes and was instrumental in Senate Bill 6. And the executive director of it is a woman by the name of Patricia Levesque. And they are very, very instrumental in education policy in our state. They basically wrote Senate Bill 6. So now Governor Christ has kind of broken ties, and he establishes a task force of business, Republican legislators, that 2 voted for Senate Bill 6, 2 superintendents of schools, the president of the state PTA, 2 school board members, and I was on that state task force, someone representing the disabled, and the teacher of the year for the state of Florida, and one other union leader, and the president of the Florida Education Association. So we go into a room in Tallahassee, and the chair of that is a gentleman by the name of Alberto Cavallo, who is the superintendent of schools in Miami-Dade. Guess how many students Miami-Dade school has, school district? It's the 3rd largest in the nation. Take a guess. Just 200? No. 350,000. Enormous school district, absolutely enormous. There are 14,000 school districts in the United States. Miami-Dade is the 3rd largest in the nation. So he chaired this meeting, and we sat there for 12 hours. We had a half-hour lunch break. He kept bringing in Cuban coffee. Did any of y'all have that? It keeps you awake. So we were there from 9 in the morning until 9 at night. We hammered out a memorandum of understanding that we sent to the feds and came across. We did win the funding. However, that's just the beginning of the work.